My wife cheated on me and my parents stood with her. Now I am not replying them even after 122 missed calls and 250 messages. There's a moment in every man's life when the ground beneath him gives way. When everything he once believed to be solid and real turns to dust, slipping through his fingers like ash. For me, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday. I had left work a little early that day, eager to surprise my wife, Lauren. We'd been going through a rough patch lately, strained conversations, fewer date nights, and an emotional distance I couldn't seem to close. I thought maybe a spontaneous dinner, just the two of us, could bridge the growing gap. I stopped by her favorite Thai place. Picking up her usual order, chicken pad Thai with extra peanuts. I was smiling to myself, imagining her surprised expression, when I pulled into the driveway of our house. Her car was there. But so was another one. A sleek black Mercedes parked slightly askew on the curb. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to my boss, Richard Klein. My stomach twisted sharply. My first thought wasn't suspicion, it was confusion. Maybe they were discussing something work-related. Maybe she was helping him plan the company fundraiser. I walked up to the house, quietly letting myself in. The living room was dark, and I made my way down the hallway toward the bedroom. That's when I heard them. Soft, breathy moans. The unmistakable rhythm of the bed creaking in time with their movements. For a moment, I was frozen. My brain refused to process the sounds, clinging desperately to denial. But when I stepped into the doorway, all illusions were shattered. There they were. My wife and my boss. Tangled in the sheets of our marital bed, Lauren's back arched, her lips parted in pleasure, completely unaware of my presence. Richard's hands were gripping her hips, the same hands that had once clapped me on the back during meetings. For a heartbeat, the world slowed. I felt hollow. Like I was watching the scene from somewhere far away, detached from my own body. And then the rage hit. Are you fucking kidding me? I roared, my voice slicing through the humid air. Lauren's eyes flew open. She gasped sharply, scrambling for the sheets. Richard rolled off her with a startled curse, clutching at the blanket like the pathetic coward he was. Will, wait, Lauren stammered, her voice dripping with panic. It's not what it, don't, I growled, cutting her off. My hands were trembling, white-knuckled at my sides. Don't you fucking dare insult my intelligence. Richard, the man I had worked for and trusted, had the audacity to open his mouth. William. Let me explain, I turned on him with a snarl, my fists clenched at my sides. Explain. I spat. Explain how you've been screwing my wife behind my back. Lauren lunged toward me, her eyes glistening with fake tears, gripping my wrist with trembling fingers. Please, just let me, I yanked my arm away from her as though her touch burned. Without another word, I turned and walked out. In the days that followed, I was a walking shell of myself. Lauren moved out that very night, leaving only a short, sniveling note behind, filled with excuses and empty apologies. I didn't bother reading the whole thing. I tore it in half and threw it into the trash. The divorce papers came faster than I expected. She didn't contest it. Why would she? She had gotten what she wanted, a new life with Richard, complete with luxury cars and a membership at the country club. But what hurt me more than her betrayal was the betrayal of my own parents. When I called my mom and dad, broken and raw, I expected sympathy. Comfort. Even just quiet support. But instead, I got something far worse. You have to understand, William, my mother's voice was laced with condescension, as if I were being unreasonable. Lauren made a mistake. She's still family. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. She's not family, I bit out. She cheated on me. With my boss. But my father's voice came over the line next, calm and dismissive. Will, don't let your pride get the better of you. She's still a good woman. You two can work through this. Good woman. I nearly threw my phone across the room. But it got worse. When the divorce was finalized, my parents invited Lauren and Richard to their house for Sunday brunch. Sunday brunch, the same tradition they had started when I was a boy. As though nothing had happened. As though the people who destroyed my marriage were still welcome at their table. And the worst part? They didn't even tell me. I found out through a family friend. The day I saw the picture on social media, a photo of my mother smiling beside Lauren, my father shaking hands with Richard as if he were a goddamn business partner, I felt something inside me break. That was the day I cut them off. After the divorce, I sold the house. The home Lauren and I had once shared held nothing but ghosts. I got rid of the bed she had defiled with Richard. I donated the couch we had picked out together. I sold the dining table where we had shared countless meals. I left with nothing but a duffel bag of clothes, my laptop, and a few childhood mementos. I rented a small apartment on the other side of town, a place no one would think to look for me. I needed space. I needed to be alone. In the months that followed, I slowly rebuilt my life. I found a new job at a different company, one where I didn't have to see Richard's smug face or hear my coworkers whispering about my humiliation. I started going to the gym again, not out of vanity, but to release the simmering rage that still pulsed beneath my skin. With every punch I threw at the boxing bag, I imagined Richard's face. With every bead of sweat, I shed the weight of betrayal. I made new friends, people who didn't know about my past. People who didn't look at me with pity. And slowly, I healed. I stopped checking Lauren's social media. I stopped wondering whether my parents missed me. I stopped caring. Or at least, I thought I did. For a while, after cutting my parents out of my life, I felt liberated. The silence was a balm to my soul. The absence of their calls and messages gave me space to breathe, to think, and most importantly, to heal. But the peace was short-lived. At first, it was just a few random calls. My mother's number would pop up on my screen every few weeks. I didn't answer. I let it ring out, figuring she'd get the message. Then my father called, then my mother again, then both, over and over. By the end of the first month, my phone showed 14 missed calls. I didn't think much of it. It was annoying but manageable. I blocked their numbers and moved on with my day, but they didn't stop. When they realized I had blocked their usual numbers, they switched to different ones. At first, they used their landline. Then, my mother started using her office phone. When that didn't work, they began borrowing phones from relatives, mutual friends, even co-workers. One day, I received 25 missed calls in the span of 4 hours. The next day, 50 messages flooded my inbox. By the end of the week, I had accumulated 80 missed calls and over 150 texts. It wasn't just my parents either. My aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in years, called me out of the blue. When I picked up, thinking it was a work-related call, she immediately launched into a teary plea. "Will, honey, your mom is heartbroken," she said in a soft, patronizing voice. "She's not sleeping. She just wants to talk to you." I hung up without a word. The next day, a coworker I barely spoke to walked up to my desk at work with a sheepish look. "Hey, I don't know what's going on, but this woman named Patricia keeps calling the office asking for you. Says she's your mother. HR told her you can't take personal calls here, but she's still calling." I clenched my fists. My own mother was calling my workplace. That night, I sat on my couch, phone in hand, scrolling through the hundreds of texts that had piled up. My inbox was overflowing with the same desperate messages. "Will, please call us back. We miss you. We were wrong. We're so sorry. Let's put everything behind us. Lauren regrets everything. You two can still fix this." I stared at the last message for a long time. Lauren. I hadn't seen or spoken to my ex-wife since the divorce was finalized. The mention of her name made my stomach turn. the audacity of my parents, to bring her into this. To think they had the right to guilt me into forgiving them. I blocked every number they had used, one by one. But every time I did, new ones appeared. I switched my phone to silent mode. I turned off my voicemail. I uninstalled my social media accounts, but they still found ways to reach me. One night, as I sat on my apartment balcony with a beer in hand, my phone buzzed violently on the table. I glanced at it. Unknown caller. I let it go to voicemail, but as I stared out at the city skyline, something gnawed at me, a morbid curiosity. Against my better judgment, I picked up the phone and listened to the message. My mother's voice came through, cracked and uneven with sobs. "Will. Please. I'm begging you. I'm so sorry. We didn't mean to hurt you." She drew in a shaky breath. "We made a mistake. Please forgive us." Her voice was trembling, but I felt nothing. No sympathy. No pity. Just an empty, echoing void. Then my father's voice came next, deep and broken. "Son." He rarely called me that. It was almost jarring to hear it. "We were wrong. Please. Just talk to us. We'll do anything." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Almost. But then I remembered. I remembered the photo of my mother smiling beside Lauren. I remembered my father shaking hands with Richard, my boss, the man who ruined my marriage. I remembered the way they dismissed my pain and welcomed my betrayers into their home. And suddenly, whatever fleeting trace of guilt I felt vanished. I deleted the message without listening to the end. The next day, they tried again. 31 missed calls. 46 text messages. I blocked the new number, but 2 hours later, I got a call from an unknown ID. I answered, exasperated. "Hello." I snapped. Silence. Then I heard my mother's voice, small and hesitant. "Will. Please. It's me." I gritted my teeth. "Don't call me again," I said flatly. Then I hung up. I blocked the unknown caller. But the calls continued. The next day, while I was at work, my phone buzzed violently in my pocket. When I pulled it out, my screen displayed the number 122 in red, glaring like an alarm. 122 missed calls. And then I opened my messages, 250 messages, 250 desperate, pleading texts from my parents. My hands trembled with rage. I wanted to scream. To throw my phone across the room. Instead, I calmly walked into the bathroom, stared at myself in the mirror, and exhaled slowly. I deleted every message. Then, I called my carrier and changed my number. After changing my phone number, I moved again, this time to a different city. A place where no one knew me. A place where I could be invisible. I found a small house with a wraparound porch and a backyard filled with untamed wildflowers. It was quiet, secluded, and perfect. There were no more calls, no more messages, no more desperate voicemails begging for forgiveness. Just silence. The first morning in my new home, I stood barefoot on the porch, watching the sun rise over the horizon. The sky was painted with hues of gold and soft lavender. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves of the oak trees at the edge of the property. For the first time in years, I felt peace settle in my chest like a familiar friend. No ghosts from my past. No reminders of betrayal. Just me. I went back to work with renewed focus. I made new friends, people who didn't know my history, who saw me as William, not the man with the cheating wife and backstabbing boss. On weekends, I hiked through the nearby trails, losing myself in the rhythm of my footsteps and the sounds of nature. I even started dating again, cautiously, carefully. No rush. No expectations. Just companionship and genuine connection. And when I lay in bed at night, I didn't think about Lauren. I didn't think about Richard. I didn't think about my parents. They were relics of a past life, a life I had burned to the ground and left behind. One evening, months later, I sat on my porch with a cold beer in hand, watching the sky bleed into sunset. My phone, finally free from harassment, sat quietly beside me. For the first time in a long time, I picked it up and smiled. No missed calls. No desperate messages. Just peace. I was free. Finally, truly free.